In this video, we're going to continue on with Chapter 11, all right, the second part and the rest of the chapter and some of the key things that go along with it. Now, first of all, we're going to talk about performance reviews. Performance reviews are basically where you are stating, okay, here's what was expected and here's what we actually got. This is something that all managers need to make sure they understand how to do on a consistent basis. I'm a big believer in you do something other than just the typical yearly review. As a manager, I always did quarterly reviews so that people understood where they stood, where people understood how they were doing and where they stood based on their performance at that point in time. What it did was it increased the communication and the expectations that they had for their job. A 360 review, okay, in other words, 360 degrees, in other words, all the way around a circle, is where you are getting feedback from everyone around you. So, for example, a 360-degree review is basically getting information from your boss, from maybe the people that report to you, from your peers, maybe external customers, where they are giving you feedback as far as what your performance was about. Personally, I love those. Many times, my boss never really knew everything that I was doing. It was the feedback that came from my customers, from my peers, that really did help my boss understand what the job was that I was doing. Now, there's 6 steps in it. First of all, at the beginning of the review period, you have to establish the standards that people have to meet, and they need to understand them clearly as far as what the expectations are. You evaluate the performance against those standards. You also have to be prepared to change. I had a situation one time where we were doing an MBO type thing, management by objectives, and set my objectives at the beginning of the year. During the year, some of the projects that I was working on were canceled, so I could not achieve those objectives. Got to the end of the year, and my boss is doing my evaluation, and he slammed me because I didn't get those objectives completed. I said, but the projects were canceled. There's no way I could. Doesn't matter, he said. You didn't achieve the objectives. So you have to make sure that you're clear as far as what's going on, and if you have to make changes during the year, you do. You sit down and discuss it with the employee. And any kind of corrective action that's necessary, you go ahead and make sure that you put together the plans to take what those actions might be. You use those results many times in making decisions. A lot of times the performance review is the basis for increases in pay, any kind of merit increases and things like this. It's also used for determining what the bonuses might be if your company has a bonus program. They might identify training needs or use it as a promotion tool, okay? Think about the hiring process. In other words, this may be a person that is eligible or would be a good candidate for the next position up, things like this. Some mistakes made in performance reviews. First of all, there's the contrast effect, where you compare one person against another. Not necessarily fair and not necessarily the right thing to do. They may have totally different jobs. The halo and the horn effect. In other words, letting one or two areas influence the overall performance evaluation unfairly. And the similar to me effect. Many times we tend to hire and be much more generous to folks who are like us. And so you have to be careful about some of these biases that you may have when reviewing employees. Now, compensation. The whole idea behind compensation is to fairly compensate people for the job that they are doing. First of all, it attracts the people that you want to your business. It also helps people to work efficiently and productively as long as they're not thinking about the pay. It keeps valued employees from going to competitors. If you're paying them what they feel they're worth and they're being paid fairly, they'll stick around. Another thing to think about is competitive market position. Pay levels are set based on the market and the strategy that the organization has. Some organizations say we want the very best people, and so they're going to set a strategy where they are very competitive with some of their competition. There's some who are saying, okay, we're just going to be low cost, and they're expecting a lot of turnover that goes along with that. So it depends on the strategy that you're trying to set, plus what are your goals as far as your people are concerned. And there's different ways of paying people. You could have a salary. In other words, it doesn't matter how many hours you work, you're getting paid the same amount per week, per month, whatever. Could be hourly, okay, or days. In other words, you work a certain number of hours, you get paid X amount per hour. Maybe you have a piecework system. In other words, you get paid X number of dollars for every Y number that you produce. Salespeople are typically on commission plans. In other words, you make a sale, you get X% for as far as a commission is concerned. Bonus plans, where you achieve a certain level and you have a bonus. They give you a bonus. Then you have profit sharing. In other words, for all of the profits that the company makes, they share a portion of that with the employees. So the higher the profits, the more employees get with those plans. Maybe there's gain sharing. The whole idea behind gain sharing is increases in quality or customer satisfaction or something like that. Because the assumption is if you're improving quality, you're improving profit. So they'll share some of those profits with you. Another way of rewarding folks many times is with stock options. In other words, an option is where you have the opportunity to buy a certain amount of stock at a certain price. And it will expire, say, 5-10 years down the road. And so if what you're hoping is the stock goes up. So let's say you get an option to buy 100 shares at $5 a share. Well, you're hoping that the stock price for the company goes up. So let's say the stock price of the company goes up to $8 a share. You can exercise that option where you buy those 100 shares at $5 and then you turn around and sell them for $8 each. That's the whole idea behind stock options. You also have to think about maybe compensating teams. Many times companies are using teams in order to get things done, and they will set some programs, pay programs, for those teams. Many times they'll use what's called skill-based pay. In other words, you build up certain skills and they pay you X number of dollars for reaching those skills. Fringe benefits are something that every organization provides. Some companies provide more than others. Fringe benefits might be things like sick leave, vacation plan, any kind of pension plans. Good luck finding those today. But one of the things they will do is help you with retirement plans. Health plans, things like this. Today, over 30% of a person's compensation is actually coming from benefits. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. When companies are paying another $12,000 for your insurance, for your medical insurance, that may not be cash in your pocket. The thing is, that's something you don't have to buy. They can have things as far as fringe benefits, bennies or perks, things like company cars, country club memberships, discounts at places, paid and unpaid sabbaticals. When I was at Hallmark, after our creative folks, the artists, photographers, things like that, had been there for a certain number of years and they had certain performance levels, they could take a 3-month sabbatical where they could go do anything they wanted on a creative side. All they had to do was bring it back to Hallmark to show. Whether it was used or not, didn't matter, but they had the chance to go out and get creative. Student loan debt payments. This is a great fringe benefit if you can get it. All of my schooling, all of my college and university education was done with tuition reimbursement. It took me longer to get my degree done because I was working full-time, going to school part-time for both my undergraduate, my graduate, and my doctoral work was all done using tuition reimbursement. Of course, again, it took longer because I was working full-time and going to school part-time, but I had absolutely no debt. They may also use what's called cafeteria-style fringe benefits. In other words, here is a slate of things that you can choose as far as your benefits are concerned. You can get medical insurance, maybe there's some vision care, dental care, various other things, and you can choose what it is that you're using, what it is that you're actually purchasing from the various organizations. Trying to make sure that you have the right person working at the right time means that you may have to use different types of scheduling. There could be flex time, where you are given the freedom to figure out what time you're going to come in and what time you're going to leave, as long as you're there during certain hours of the day. You could have a compressed work week. In other words, you're working 4 10-hour days. That might work out for people. Maybe one of the things that you're doing is job sharing. For example, many years ago, I was working for a bank, and I was hiring some folks to do a particular job. One of the things that I did was I hired a couple of people to work in the morning and a couple of other people to work in the afternoon. They were basically job sharing. Flex time plans, again, are kind of a great way of attracting and keeping folks because it gives them more flexibility as far as when it is that they're actually going to work. Because what happens is maybe you have to be there at some point in time between 6:30 in the morning and 6:30 in the evening. You can choose when it is that you're going to be there. So for example, in this situation, Sarah decides to start at 7. She takes her lunch during this time frame because everybody has to be working during the core time and this core time, and she leaves at 3:30. John might decide to come in at 8:30, take his lunch between 12:30 and 1, and maybe he will then leave at 5. So with flex time, what it does is it gives people the opportunity to make some choices as far as when they come in. Maybe it's for childcare, maybe it's for transportation issues, things like this. And there's more and more people who are doing home-based work, where instead of just going to an office, one of the things you're doing is you're working partially or all remotely from home. There are a lot of benefits to the organization. What happens is it reduces some of the sick days and absences that people have. It reduces the cost of on-site office space. Challenges, it makes it harder to make sure that you're managing the workload and making sure that people are doing the things that are necessary. You have to make sure that you have people that you can trust in order to do this. You also have to have a good way of measuring their performance. For the person, what it does is it gives them more flexibility by eliminating some of the commute time, reducing expenses. Problem, downside, challenges, isolation. Many times out of sight, out of mind. In other words, that whole idea of promotions and things might pass them by because they're not around. To society, what it does is it decreases traffic. Good luck with that. Increases time to build community ties. Challenges may reduce the ability to impact with other people. So there's some positives and some negatives when it comes to working from home. With job sharing, many times people don't want to work full time. In my example with the bank, what I was doing is I was actually hiring college students. I had college students who had afternoon classes. They were working in the morning. I had college students who had morning classes and they were working in the afternoon. And they were sharing those different jobs. What it did was it reduced the absenteeism and tardiness. In other words, if somebody was out, I lost half a day, not a full day's work. And sometimes one of the things we need to do is move people up or out, okay? As a manager, I am hoping that the people that are reporting to me are developing to the point where they can get promoted, which means that I'm going to have to be developing folks, I'm going to have to be training folks on almost a consistent basis. And so from a human resource management standpoint, we have to plan and think about which ones are going to be promoted, and then also which ones might transfer between departments, or how many are going to leave the company altogether. And so these are things that we have to plan for as far as our human resource management is concerned. There are also going to be times when we have to terminate someone. It could be for cause. In other words, maybe they were stealing, or maybe they got in a fight with somebody. Termination, right off the bat, right there, you're letting them go. There may be situations where you're going to have a downsizing, and you have to let people go because you just can't afford to keep that many people. That can be very difficult. It's very difficult and I've had this situation where you have to sit across the table from someone and tell them, you no longer have a job through no fault of your own. That can be very difficult for folks, and it's something that needs to be planned for. If you're going to avoid any kind of wrongful discharge lawsuits, you have to be aware of things that you need to do. First of all, never, ever, ever promise permanent employment. If you make a promise of permanent employment, either in writing or orally, you could be charged and sued for unlawful discharge. People have to understand that we're in a situation of employment at will. They can leave anytime they want, and we can let them go anytime we want, as long as it was for a particular cause. Before we fire someone, we have to make sure we're doing the documentation that's necessary. For example, I have fired people several times, and in doing that, I had to document their performance. What was the expectation, what they actually provided, what kind of conversations I had. And we had a disciplinary process that went through various stages, where we had an oral warning, then we had a first written warning, then we had a final written warning, and then we had termination. And I had to walk through all of those situations before that person could be let go. It took time. The thing is, it's the right thing to do for the person, so that the person knows, here are the expectations, and you have a chance to turn it around. Here is what the impacts will be if you don't. So these are some of the key things from this chapter. If you have questions, please give me a shout.